everyone, and welcome some of the stories we have for you right now. Economic ultimatum. Donald Trump's commerce pick signals a way for Canada to avoid tariffs.
This is a separate tariff to create action from Mexico and action from Canada.
The diplomatic dance with billions at stake and a deadline looming.
And economic activity is picking up.
Breaking down the new rate cut and the financial implications for Canadians.
Did you say that?
And that's what the developer of
I want all of our
said.
colleagues to hear it, Mr. Kennedy.
Confirmation clash, the combative hearing for U.S. Health Secretary nominee RFK Jr.
Anxiety among our communities is at record levels.
And marking a solemn anniversary with a renewed fight against Islamophobia.
CTV National News with Sandy Ronaldo.
Donald Trump's selection for Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick has just made things interesting. At a Senate confirmation hearing today, Lutnick was asked about tariffs. Here's his answer.
It's not a tariff per se. It is an action of domestic policy.
Okay, so it's not a tariff, it's an action of domestic policy. What does that mean for Canada with the February 1st deadline quickly approaching? Is this possibly a reprieve? Let's bring in CTV's Rachel Aiello. And Rachel, what's the takeaway from Howard Lutnick's statement?
Still fentanyl coming into this country and killing.
Sandy, U.S. President Donald Trump's intentions when it comes to how hard and how soon Canada could be hit with tariffs has been difficult to pin down. So his commerce pick, shedding new light on what the Americans have in mind, has at least offered the Canadian government some new clues. Fresh insight today from Commerce Secretary nominee Howard Lutnick, signaling to U.S. senators that Canada could still avoid the tariffs expected this weekend.
This tariff model is simply to shut their borders with respect America. If we are your biggest trading partner, show us the respect, shut your border, and end fentanyl coming into this country.
Lutnick said if Canada and Mexico clamp down on what he called the micro issue of cross-border security, tariffs may not be needed. But a broader study on trade practices due April 1st is happening, meaning Canada should still brace for tariffs in the spring.
That's not the ordinary tariff. The ordinary tariffs need to be studied and examined, and that will start, as the EO said, in April.
This insight into how Trump's administration may distinguish between different tariff threats comes as Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and the premiers talked again today about Canada's response plan. According to one premier, the Prime Minister did convey that they are looking at two potential dates and the possibility of preventing the February 1st tariffs tied to the border. As Trump's talk has evolved, federal and provincial leaders have kept up lobbying efforts south of the border in hopes that the president would back down. But anticipating that he won't, Canadian officials are preparing for all potential outcomes.
Canada's border is strong, and we're making it stronger.
Today, Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly met with U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio in D.C., where Canada's $1.3 billion border plan was said to be on the agenda. Sandy?
Okay, Rachel, thank you for this. Now, all of this on the day the governor of the Bank of Canada cut the trend-setting bank rate by 25 basis points to 3%, saying we're in a good place. But Tiff Macklem added that a protracted tariff war with the U.S. will produce uncertainty and could badly hurt Canada's economy. CTV senior political correspondent Michael Couture now on the messaging from the chief banker. Mike?
Well, Sandy, the good news about a sixth consecutive interest rate cut was overshadowed somewhat by the looming threat of U.S. tariffs.
In the case of a protracted, significant trade conflict, it would badly hurt economic activity in Canada. Economic activity would be lower.
How much lower remains unclear. However, the Bank of Canada has gamed out one scenario that sees a global trade war, where the U.S. applies 25% tariffs on all countries and everyone reciprocates. In that case, the Canadian economy would take a massive hit.
If you thought growth was going to be 2%, if you take 2.5% off 2, you've got a negative number. So yes, people would call that a recession.
The governor of the Bank of Canada says it's tough to predict what U.S. President Donald Trump will decide on tariffs. However, Tiff Macklem believes the Canadian economy is in a good position given inflation is in the so-called sweet spot.
It's below the 2% target now, even though some of the core measures are still trending a little bit above the target. Given that the unemployment rate has gone up, the economy, it's growing, it's moving forward, but not at a strong pace.
Macklem hasn't ruled out further rate cuts, but he has to consider possible tariffs and whatever stimulus package the government may put forth to help Canadians affected by a trade war. Sources tell CTV News the relief could reach pandemic levels, but economists warn against repeating COVID-era mistakes.
Obviously led to a very significant increase in the deficit, and which we're still dealing with to some extent, but it also contributed in a very powerful way to the inflation that we've seen. And the fact that the Bank of Canada raised interest rates as much as they did.
The governor of the central bank says monetary policy can't offset the effects of higher tariffs. But Macklem does have the tools that can help the economy adjust to whatever comes from the U.S. Sandy?
Okay, Mike, thanks. Of course, homeowners renewing mortgages this year are breathing a sigh of relief. But should they lock in or stick with a variable mortgage? And is this a good time to buy or sell? CTV's Kathy Lee went out to get some answers, and here's what she learned. Kathy.
Sandy, a mortgage expert CTV News spoke to says it's a win-win. Sellers are going to have more people interested in buying their home, and buyers are going to have more affordable monthly payments. I spoke to a homeowner who is selling his home on an acreage right outside Calgary. His house has been on the market for about 200 days, and he says last summer was a tough year because of the higher mortgage rate. He says buyers were afraid to commit. He's had to drop the price on his home just to level it out with the market demand. With the rate decrease announced today, he is very hopeful this will translate to a lower mortgage rate and eventually a buyer.
There's a lot of interest on trying to get people into the market, but to build that trust, that mindset, that really comes down to that interest rate change going down. Even though it's not a lot, and most people would say it's not enough, at least it says we're going in that direction.
Experts say the Bank of Canada decision should prompt the prime rate to fall to 5.2% at most Canadian lenders and lead to lower variable mortgage rates.
If you can take that variable rate and just kind of put yourself into a holding pattern for a few months, that might be quite advantageous to be able to lock in that fixed once we kind of see that hopefully 3% X rate, probably higher 3% in that range.
For homeowners who need to renew their mortgage soon, advice from the experts is to shop around to more than one bank to get the best deal. Sandy.
Okay, CTV's Kathy Lee. Now, one of Donald Trump's most controversial cabinet nominees faced his first hearing today. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is up for U.S. Health Secretary and in his opening remarks denied being against vaccines.
News reports have claimed that I'm anti-vaccine or anti-industry. I am neither. I am pro-safety.
Protesters interrupted Kennedy, who has a long record of anti-vaccine activism. He was also asked about other controversial remarks.
Did you say Lyme disease is a highly likely militarily engineered bioweapon?
I probably did say that.
I've known Bobby my whole life. We grew up together.
Meanwhile, on social media, his cousin Caroline Kennedy urged senators to reject him, saying he profited off misinformation. So RFK Jr. facing quite a grilling inside his U.S. Senate confirmation hearing and beyond. And we wanted to get CTV political analyst Eric Ham's thoughts on today's proceedings. Eric, RFK is certainly a controversial pick. You know, he's got many detractors. Some consider him dangerous, unqualified for the job. How did he do today?
He did not do well at all. In fact, what we saw was not only a hearing that was deeply combustible, but you saw a number of Democratic senators who simply threw away the decorum, typically what we see in the U.S. Senate. In fact, if you look at Colorado Senator Michael Bennet, who many saw as on the fence in terms of his support for Robert Kennedy Jr., clearly that was all bets off, because what we're seeing now is Democrats are unified in their lack of support for Robert Kennedy Jr. And it's unclear, at least at this moment, if he has the support even of all the Republicans as well.
What I found interesting, his cousin, Caroline Kennedy, daughter of John F. Kennedy, posted a damning letter and read it on social media. I want to play a bit more of that for you.
Bobby continues to grandstand off my father's assassination and that of his own father. It's incomprehensible to me that someone who is willing to exploit their own painful family tragedies for publicity would be put in charge of America's life and death situations.
Eric, a tough talk. I mean, she also called her cousin a predator. How much weight do her comments have, could they possibly have in this decision process?
Oh, I think they could actually be a turning point for Kennedy's nomination. We don't often hear from Caroline Kennedy much about anything. In fact, we know that she doesn't really speak on political matters. And the fact that she came out against her first cousin and sent this video to all of the senators, I think it could actually sway some members, particularly when you're looking at people like Susan Collins of Maine and Lisa Murkowski of Alaska. And when we saw how Vice President Vance had to be the tiebreaker for Pete Hegseth, we could actually perhaps see something like that play out with this nomination as well.
Fascinating. Okay, Eric, always good to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, it is official. Ontario's provincial election is now underway.
Let me say this loud and clear. Canada is not for sale.
Conservative Party leader Doug Ford took aim at Donald Trump as he launched his campaign. Ford's opponents, like Liberal leader Bonnie Crombie, focused on the troubling state of Ontario's health care, while NDP leader Marit Stiles says Ford is not the one to negotiate with Trump. A somber anniversary to mark today. It was 8 years ago that a gunman walked into a Quebec City mosque and murdered 6 men in cold blood and injured 19 others. Since then, January 29th has become the National Day of Remembrance and Action Against Islamophobia. And today, Canadians across the country were standing up against hate. CTV's Quebec Bureau Chief Geneviève Beauchemin is at a vigil in Montreal. Geneviève, how are Quebecers marking this terrible day?
Well, Sandy, there are mourners here tonight, but it's a relatively small vigil, and people here are saying they want more Canadians to stand up to make their voices heard against hate, against this day where bullets pierced the peace of prayer.
Traces of the deadly rampage on this sacred place of worship have all but been erased. Only a single bullet hole remains in memory. But 8 years on, some fear memories too have faded. Hate and ignorance of the other were the main factors in this tragedy, said Mosque President Mohamed Labidi last week, and those linger. Once a moment of unity, this year commemorative ceremonies in Quebec City have been muted. This while the need to never forget grows, say those fighting Islamophobia.
The green represents the carpet where they, had their last breaths.
Canada's special representative on combating Islamophobia points to frightening statistics. Police reported hate crimes targeting Muslims rose 94% in 2023, and Islam remains the least favorably viewed of Canada's major religions.
Canada is a place where we have so many vibrant cultures and backgrounds and people, and this is something to be very proud of. It's something we need to work and foster when there are so many efforts to undermine our unity. We got to hold together against that.
In the days after the shooting, this very square here was filled with people standing in solidarity with the victims. Tonight, people are hoping that that will happen again, that this will shine through once again, and that more people will remember this day, Sandy.
CTV Geneviève Beauchemin in Montreal. Jen, thank you. Coming up after the break, reaching out from behind bars.
It was like deja vu, man.
How an imprisoned scammer was able to create a whole new dating profile. Plus, dismantling the operation behind a string of stolen cars. some dramatic video to share with you of the moment a U.S. fighter jet fell out of the sky. The F-35 jet could be seen plummeting to the ground at a U.S. Air Force base in Alaska, the pilot luckily managing to eject before it went down. The plane was taking part in training exercises when the incident happened. The Air Force is now looking into what could have caused the crash. So when you hear the words romance scam, everyone's ears perk up. CTV's W5 has been investigating the story of a man who scammed multiple women. He got caught and is now behind bars. But here's the twist. He is still scamming. John Woodward joins us again today with part 2 of his investigation. All right, John, what's happening here? What's going on?
So, Sandy, we told you yesterday how John Moulder was sentenced to 8 years in prison for a scam that involved 13 women, $160,000, and the women say there could be even more than that. The scam mostly originated with him on online dating sites. That's where he'd meet people. So imagine the women's surprise when they see him posting yet another online dating profile, but he's behind bars. So take a look.
It was definitely a sigh of relief to know that he was behind bars. It was short-lived for sure.
While Moulder was behind bars in November, this profile appeared on the dating website Plenty of Fish. It said, "I have used a few dating sites over the years for the wrong reasons. I am currently serving an 8-year sentence for several accounts of fraud. I'm at the point of my life where I am wanting to find someone I can be myself with."
What's it like to hear those words?
It was like deja vu, man.
All right, John, he's behind bars. You'd think there'd be checks and balances in place. How is he getting away with this?
That's a great question. We looked into it. It appears to be as simple as him getting unrestricted access to the internet, which is extremely rare in prisons around the world. Most places in Canada, prisons in Canada, don't allow internet at all. But what we found when we looked into this is there's the official policy and then there's what really happens. And it turns out numbers that we've obtained indicate there could be thousands of prisoners every year getting that access. And it's a much bigger problem than just one man.
Wow. Okay, John, I know we're going to talk to you again tomorrow for part 3, and your full report will be seen this evening on CTV National News with Homeowners.
That's right.
Good to talk to you. Thank you. Still ahead after the break, standing on guard for Canada's reputation. Why so many Canadians feel the country's global image is tanking. Six people are facing more than 60 charges in a stolen vehicle investigation by Toronto police.
These were not the people going out and stealing the vehicles at the frontline level. These were, I believe, the processors of that of the vehicles that would be then moved on to the next level up.
Last week, police say 8 vehicles were found disassembled at an auto body shop in the Toronto area after 6 others were discovered in a shipping container back in September. Police say they also found a replica handgun, ammo, and a GPS jammer. They believe the cars were destined for export. So, Donald Trump has been bashing Canada on the world stage, calling us difficult, saying he doesn't need our lumber or oil or anything from us for that matter. All of this has to have an effect on Canada's self-image. And according to a new Nanos research survey, it does. We asked CTV's Alex Carpa to look into the numbers. Alex, what do Canadians think?
Yeah, Sandy, 2/3 of Canadians now believe our country's international reputation has gotten worse over the last year. Tensions with China, India, and poor relations with the United States are some of the factors that Canadians feel have hurt Canada's image on the global stage. 64% of Canadians in the same Nanos poll believe the country is headed in the wrong direction, almost the exact opposite of how Canadians felt in 2015 when Justin Trudeau took office. Some Canadians I spoke to agree and say Canada needs to do a better job of dealing with Donald Trump.
Yeah, he's just using us to scare other countries.
We're not the only ones that have become Donald Trump's punching bag. I think also the Mexicans as well.
We all have to figure out how to respond to him. And I think the whole globe is trying to figure out what the heck to do with this guy.
It has taken a hit pandering to the U.S.
definitely.
I'm not happy with us pandering or giving in to Trump. I wouldn't, and his policies.
Nanos also took the pulse of Canadians, gauging which federal party they support, and the results show that the Conservatives still hold a sizable lead at 42%, the Liberals behind at 25%, and the NDP sitting at 18%. Sandy?
CTV's Alex Carpa. And Canadian rock band Sum 41 is preparing for its last show ever at Scotiabank Arena tomorrow. The band will be inducted into the Canadian Music Hall of Fame at the Juno Awards in March. And we'll be back in a moment. A new version of the age-old sport of soccer is picking up steam across the country, and it involves walking, something that lets players stay active when running isn't in the cards. CTV's Alison Bamford in Saskatoon spent the morning at a drop-in walking soccer game. And Alison, what are the benefits of this new approach?
Sandy, this is a slow-paced sport that's gaining momentum. Just like pickleball shot up in popularity, players here are hoping walking soccer can do the same. This isn't your typical game of pickup soccer. The nets are smaller, the rules slightly different, and how you move matters the most.
You can move quite quickly, but you have to drag your feet.
Rob Husband is used to the fast pace of regular soccer, having played it for years. But once his running days were numbered, he had to adapt.
Everything kind of starts wearing out with time, but this kind of gives you another opportunity to still continue to play the game.
For those whose bodies still let them, they dabble in both regular soccer leagues and drop-in walking soccer.
The not running is the hardest part. So you have to kind of learn to marathon walk, otherwise you will end up running.
David Taylor estimates the average age on the pitch is somewhere around 65. At 78, he's the oldest one out there, playing with athletes he competed against 20 years ago.
It's about still keeping up friendships. You know, that's what it is, more than anything.
These players want to see the average age drop and the number of athletes increase. The Canadian Walking Soccer Association says it's already seeing that growth in Ontario and BC.
There's quite a few younger folks as well who play, and when I say young, I mean as young as like late 20s, for example.
A few Canadian cities have their own walking soccer leagues, and in countries like England, the sport has really taken off. Much more competitive than the pickup games played here, but the players say these ones are more about exercise and having fun.
Okay.
Sandy?
Okay, Allison, thank you. And thank you for sharing your time with us. I'm Sandy Ronaldo. Your local CTV News is coming up, and we'll see you tomorrow, we hope. Bye for now.